Goal setting is a very broad principle in the study of PE and sport, and in many ways we're going to refine this down to some quite simplistic ideas today, but I want you to realise this fits into a bigger picture, and I will touch on that on a couple of occasions during this tutorial. I guess the first thing I want you to realise is that goal setting in its broader sense is a significant feature of the mental profile of an athlete. Okay, so we need to consider this in terms of the mental profile of an athlete, and what I mean by this is the things, if I spell it correctly, it always helps, is the things that is going through an athlete's mind during training, pre-competition, during competition. This goal setting is an important feature of that athlete, of that mental profile of an athlete. Okay, so we want to be thinking about that. Secondly, I think it's also important to stress that this is important for focus. Goal setting is important for an individual to focus. It's important for motivation. It's also important for what we might refer to as specificity. And again, we're thinking about that in relation to, I guess, fitness to a degree, but specificity in terms of making sure the training, the development, the technical coaching that an athlete receives, for example, is relevant to the specific needs and the desires of what that athlete is trying to achieve. Finally, before we kind of get into the meat of this, I want you to really also recognize that goal setting is really important for controlling arousal. Okay, for controlling arousal. So if we think about arousal, I'm going to throw in the word anxiety there as well. And if we think about the negative forms of arousal, things like apprehension, worry, nervousness, it could be sort of physical or somatic, like a tension, for example, then this can be reduced or at least controlled by good goal setting and the athlete really having it clear what it is that they're working towards. Now, I don't often like to start teaching with what we might call an acronym, but today I'm going to do that. So the acronym I'm going to provide for you is SMARTER, and it's going to structure how our goals can be set. So just to be clear, in a minute we're going to end up with something that looks vertically like this, SMARTER, and we're going to take each of these letters in turn and look at the key principles with regard to goal setting. So the first thing I want to talk about is the notion that goals must be specific. Now, this is quite a broad concept, but a couple of things I'd like you to think about. Goals should be specific to things like the activity profile that a performer is taking part in. Let's just think about that in a very blunt way. A gymnast is likely to use different goals in their fitness training, for example, to a rugby forward. Okay, those goals are going to be quite different. Okay, in other words, they're going to be specific, but it could also be to the position, or let's call it the role, that a performer takes in a particular sport. So if you're a games player, you might want to differentiate between a hockey midfielder and goalkeeper, for example. If you are a If you are a racket sports player, you might want to think about the difference between someone who specialises in, say, singles and someone who specialises in doubles. If you are, say, a gymnast, you may want to think about the differences between the roles that male Olympic gymnasts and female Olympic gymnasts take, and therefore the different goals, the specific goals they might work on in relation to the specific positions, roles, or activity profiles. Other thing, it's a very obvious one, this one. Training and goals need to be specific to the component of fitness. Okay, so I guess a classic would be something like a dancer is going to goal set towards increasing flexibility, increasing the range of movement at joints, flexibility, so that they have better lines, they have more smooth movement. But they might also look to develop things like explosive strength, power. Those would be important. Now, finally, it could be that the athlete is specifically targeting and goal setting towards a body part or what we might call an area of the body. Think about a shot putter who really looks to strengthen their shoulders, for example, those deltoid muscles around the shoulders. They really look to develop the explosiveness of that particular muscle. That makes sense, right? So that could be relevant too. Let's look at the M of our model. Okay, so let's look at the M. We're talking here about goals needing to be measurable. Okay, so what do we mean by measurable? I guess it's fairly obvious, but let's go through it. I like to think of them as quantifiable. So if a goal is set Is it quantifiable? Is it achieved? We should be able to measure that quantifiably, and we should be able to measure that objectively. So, okay, so this is not a subjective opinion based, did the training go well? Well, it kind of felt good. No. Did we get from the measurement point A to the measurement point B? Okay, did that journey happen? Yes or no? That is a measurable, objective, quantifiable target. So give you examples of what this might be. This could be something like, that's meant to be a percentage sign. Don't know what happened there. A percentage improvement. Okay, so think about an athlete who aims to increase their a gymnast who aims to increase their sit and reach test score over 6 weeks by 5%. That is measurable. Did they do it or not? So a percentage improvement. It could also be something like a ratio. Think about something that's skill-based, for example. A tennis player wishes to increase their first serve success ratio in their next 8 matches by an additional 10%. That would be a very measurable goal to set, for example. Let's look at something else. It could be the athlete wants to achieve a personal best by some point, and I've mentioned this last one already with that sit and reach test, but it could be that they want to improve a fitness test result. Okay, they're all quantifiable, they're all measurable. Let's address the A, and here we are talking, put it in here, we are talking about the goal must be agreed. And it seems kind of subtle, this point, but we want the agreement to be probably between coach and athlete, or trainer and athlete. Okay, so this means that the stakeholders, the people who are investing in this, both agree that this is the right thing to be aimed for. And I should say that this is sometimes, especially with higher level athletes, this is sometimes multiple people. Okay, this could be a whole training team, for example. Now, with younger people, it could be, say, an agreement between a club coach and a coach at school, or a teacher at school, for example. It could be that the parents involved in the agreement of that particular goal. These are possibilities. Let's look at our, what colour should I choose? Choose this one. Let's look at our R. Okay, with R, we are talking about realistic. The goal must be realistic. And again, it's fairly common sense why that would be the case. But the goal must be attainable. Now, one of the problems this leads to is that because goals must be attainable, it forces goals to be kind of short term. And therefore, athletes sometimes can lack or lose what it is long term that they're aiming for. So the point I'd make on this one is, if the goal is long term, so if we've got a long term goal, which is absolutely positive, it's a good thing, it needs to be broken into chunks. Okay? And each of these chunks, should be realistic. They should be, and as we'll see in a second, time-phased and realistic, and it should feed into this long-term overarching goal. Let's look at the T. Okay, so we've got our T here. Let's look at our T. We are talking here about time-phased. Time-phased. You'll see this as time-bound, it's sometimes called as well. It all means the same thing. Now, we are talking about that the goal must have a start and end point. Okay, so we start working on the goal on day one, and let's say it's a 6-week objective. 6 weeks later, then that goal, 42 days later, should be achieved. Okay, that's what we're looking at. 6 weeks. It could be 12 weeks. I'm not giving a specific time, but it should be, as I said before, we're going to increase by 5% our sit and reach test score in the next 6-week period. That would make a time phased. Now, it's really important to say here that this time phasing must fit into a larger plan. Okay, it's all well and good saying, right, I'm going to increase my flexibility in the next 6 weeks. Well, why? What comes next? What's come before? What are we doing alongside that? There needs to be a larger plan that this time phasing fits into. That's where the long-term goal actually is quite important, right? Now, let's look at our E. Our E, as you'll be happy to know, and it's always the case with training, right? E means exciting. Exciting, stimulating. We're talking about something that stimulates, as we said right at the start, increases motivation and focus, stimulates and motivates. Now, one of the sort of keys I would say to this one is you need to think, or you need to consider the notion of kind of type of training. It would be very easy to look at a very specific goal and say, right, for the next 12 weeks, all we're going to do is interval training to increase, let's say, speed, okay, by a certain percentage on, I don't know, the 30-meter sprint test, okay? The problem with that is it becomes dull and boring and repetitive. So type, or what we sometimes call variance, is important. We perhaps want to mix in more than one training goal at a time so that we're actually working on dual things. We can increase the range of things that we do in training. So I think that's important. But we want an exciting, stimulating. The other thing that'll make a training goal exciting is that it matters, it counts, it's leading to something positive. Now let's finish this off. Let's go for our R, and the R is recorded. 1,000,001 ways to do this, but let's just give a couple of examples. Let's just say it needs to be written down. That could be in a journal, a training diary. These are all sort of common things. I mean, I think today it's probably much more likely to be on your smartphone, but nevertheless, we want to record that, and I think the point about that, it makes it formal. Okay, so the agreement with the coach, the fact that it's written down, I've often seen it put on training environment walls to kind of drive the athlete forward to the thing we want to achieve. It makes it formal. Now, that's our SMARTER. They're the principles we want to work with. Learn them.